Hello! All right. The Rise of the Mongols is our third podcast for Unit 2. Coincidentally, this is also my third cup of coffee. I know, it's only like 4:30 and I've only had 3 cups of coffee. If you can top that, send me an email. You may win a prize. As we say in AP World, you can make anything a competition. All right, the Rise of the Mongols. And as you can see from this beautiful image below, this is what the Mongolian steppes look like. All right. The nomadic groups depended on scarce water and pasture resources. So, in times of scarcity, naturally conflicts will occur. And this resulted in the extermination of smaller groups and the formation of alliances. Mongol groups had a strong hierarchical system. It was headed by a single leader, aka the Khan. But Khans had to ask that their decisions be ratified by a council of very powerful families. Powerful Mongol groups demanded and received tribute in goods and in slaves from less powerful groups. The various Mongol groups would form complex federations that were tied together by marriage alliances. Women from prestigious families often played a very important role in negotiating these alliances, and wives and mothers of rulers traditionally managed state affairs in between the death of one ruler and the selection of a successor. Generally, they worked to secure a relative to the position. The Mongol rule was generally tolerant, with a few exceptions here and there. The seasonal movements of the Mongol tribes brought them into contact with Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam. And this led to religious toleration. Now, before the Mongols actually formed their Khanates, remember, they are pastoral nomads. And because of that, at first, Buddhism doesn't really go well. The Mongols didn't have a writing system, and to be a Buddhist, it does require that one is literate. As the Mongols begin forming their Khanates, however, Buddhism does grow. In addition, Christianity and Islam did not require one to be literate, so those would at first be a bit more successful. Prior to this, Mongols had their own religion. The Khans were thought to communicate with and represent the sky god who transcended all cultures and religions. Khans were thus conceived as a universal ruler who both transcended and used the various religions of their subjects. Administrators drawn from Islamic and Chinese worlds, while intellectuals taken from conquered kingdoms, had quite the influence on the type of religion. Trade and cultural exchange flourished under the Mongols. So we have what's called Pax Mongolica, which is peace. Merchants were still protected. And again, the Mongols were okay with diverse religion. Between 1206 and 1234, we have the formation of what would be called the Great Khan. Pardon me for just one moment, please. And I'm back. You know, it's really nice that Nimbus has this pause feature now, because before when I made these, I'd have to cover the mic and screech, and yeah, you could hear it. It was not good. So, yeah. Anyway, back to Genghis Khan. Between 1206 and 1234, we have the formation of the Great Khanate under Genghis Khan, also known as Genghis Khan. Under Genghis, all of the Khanates were united. He would become the strongest Mongol, actually, that in history. Second to him would probably be his grandson Kublai. Between 1206 and 1265, the Mongol realms would be united. And that's because the Khans of the Golden Horde, the Chagatai, and the Ilkhan recognized the authority of Genghis. Under him, aside from unifying tribes, he changed the way officials were chosen. People were chosen based on talent and merit, and not necessarily family ties. He also borrowed written script. He created a uniform legal code and reorganized the military, and he created policies on handling and integrating conquered people. Under Genghis, we have all of northern China integrated into his territory by 1220. He made examples out of towns that resisted. So if the Mongols showed up and, you were there and you chose to fight, You were going to lose. Like it's not even like, how will this play out? No, you're gonna lose. Just give up. But some towns chose to fight, and Genghis made the example of if your head came above the wagon wheel, your head had to go. It would be removed with a sword. So the softer side of Genghis Khan is typically if your head is under the wagon wheel, you're probably a child. So he didn't kill children. There we go. Yay. Again, as the reputation of Genghis spread, most towns just simply surrender. Just lay your weapons down and play dead, y'all. The Mongols conquered Persia in 1221, but then Genghis Khan died in 1227, and his son Ogadai became the new Khan. At this point in 1234, the Song dynasty still ruled southern China. They were being threatened by the Mongols. Eventually, they would be absorbed, and the creation of the Yuan dynasty would rule China. In 1236, Batu led soldiers and attacked the Russian territories, creating the Golden Horde. Batu would eventually, he's going to start the process that will eventually lead to religious formation. We'll talk more about him a little later on, though. In 1241, Ogadai died. His son Giyuk became the new Khan and is best known for sacking Baghdad and killing the last Abbasid Caliphate in 1258. Remember that date, guys. We're going to come back to it. And then he died in 1260. The Seljuk Turks were defeated in 1253. This would actually trigger the movement that led to the rise of the Ottomans. The conquest, guys. When Kublai Khan declared himself to be the Great Khan in 1265, other Mongol Khans refused to accept him. And that's because he's not the firstborn son. He's not the secondborn son. He's actually, was it third or fourth? So he's not supposed to be the Khan. But he says, well, you know what? I'm going to anyway. So what does he do? He transfers his court to China in 1271. He then conquers the southern Song and establishes the Yuan Empire, and its capital is in Beijing. And what he did is after 1279, the Yuan attempted to expand their control to Southeast Asia. Annam and Champa were forced to pay tribute. An expedition to Java ended in failure, and they were never able to have control over Japan. Historians have pointed out a number of factors that allowed the Mongols to conquer such vast territories and not even necessarily maintain that control, but just conquer them in the first place. And these factors include superior horsemanship, better bows, and the technique of following a volley of arrows with a deadly cavalry charge. And this technique would be imitated throughout history. You're especially going to see that in Europe. So you see the volley, whoosh, the arrows fly, send in the cavalry, and then the horses charge. But they're the ones that started this. The stirrup also changed the way that the Mongols were able to fight. Because first of all, guys, these are people that when they're riding a horse, they can do everything riding a horse. Sleep, eat, shoot a volley of arrows with deadly accuracy. But now there's the stirrup. So now as they're riding away, they can turn around while standing on a horse and shoot at you. Again, with deadly accuracy. The moral of the story is you do not mess with these people. They are very open to new cultures, which means they're going to take whatever works for them. One thing we also learned, guys, new military technology. They also incorporated non-Mongol soldiers into their armies. Their reputation for slaughtering people who wouldn't surrender preceded them. So A, people aren't putting up a fight. B, if they do, they know what's going to happen. The world knows what's going to happen. And the other thing is, by borrowing other people's military technology, they go from bow and arrow to a crossbow. They use ballistic tactics, and they tear down the wall that surrounds the city of Baghdad. This was an empire of people who were incredibly fierce, and they wanted you to know it. All right. The establishment of the Yuan dynasty. So Kublai Khan finished conquering the Song and established his dynasty. And here's the thing. Under him, again, tolerance, name of the game, he tolerated Chinese culture, but set the standard of living apart from the Chinese people because they are not Chinese, they are Mongolian. Again, not Chinese, so Confucianism is not going to flourish under them because Confucianism has its roots in China. The Yuan dynasty would end the exam system and they set up a new social hierarchy. Mongols, foreigners, Northern Chinese, and the Southern Chinese, aka the Southern Song. No Chinese were allowed to be in top government posts. They believed foreigners were more trustworthy, and they encouraged foreign trade and merchants to live and work in China, so they're reinvigorating the Silk Road. They favored merchants and peasants over the elites. So here's the thing, guys. Merchants carry the goods, peasants are doing the work, so they are higher up than the educated elites. And again, Pax Mongolica flourished. This is Mongolian peace. They launched 2 failed invasions of Japan. In addition to their social policies, guys, Mongols could not settle in China. They outlawed intermarriage, they promoted and supported Buddhism, and Mongol women refused to adopt Chinese customs, meaning they resisted foot binding, because Mongol women prided themselves on being very strong and independent. Men also valued women who were very strong, who could take care of themselves, who could take care of children, who didn't need help from other people. Foot binding would not allow that to happen. Now, here's something I do want to show you. It's kind of cool. There's a terrible movie that you should never, ever see. It's called The Phantom Menace. It's episode 1 of Star Wars, and y'all know I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so I am telling you, ignore the first 3, but under no circumstances should you ever watch The Phantom Menace. Not even the amazing Liam Neeson could save that movie. Between Jar Jar Binks and the awful acting from that little kid, just say no. The one redeeming factor of this film that most people will agree is phenomenal is the wardrobe of Natalie Portman's Queen Amidala. Outstanding costumes, beautiful ornate ceremonial headdresses. And I want us to take a quick look at that real quick. So, one of the more famous ones, again, very elaborate. Here's another one. And here's another one. And you're probably wondering to yourself, why is Miss Brennan showing me this? It's not to indoctrinate you into my nerd culture, which I'm very proud of, by the way. It's to show you the borrowing of cultural traditions and attire. So this is a fake world that drew a lot of its roots from actual history. And that would be Mongolian culture, specifically ceremonial dress of upper-class Mongolian women. And you can see, especially in this top one right up here, the circle, the braids with the headdress. And again, here we have the headdress. You can't see all of it, but it's there. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Wanted to share that with you. You'll notice the elevated shoulders, the fur trim, the double robes, followed by the overcoat. All right. So moving away from Star Wars, back to history. The Mongol conquest opened up overland trade routes. Again, it reinvigorated the Silk Road. And because they favored foreigners and merchants, it brought in an unprecedented commercial integration of Eurasia. The growth of long-distance trade under the Mongols led to significant transfer of military and scientific knowledge among Europe. Because remember, guys, Europe has just been pulled out of the Dark Ages, courtesy of the Crusades. This knowledge in Europe got there after it spread through the Middle East, China, Iran, and also Japan. And it stimulated European ambitions to find easier routes to Asia. So we're all about connections in history, guys. And when I say it's going to trigger Europeans to look for easier routes, this is actually one of the reasons why Europeans are going to start what we now call the Age of Exploration. We can also call it the Age of Destruction, but we'll talk more about that later on. Don't need to go on a tangent right now. Anyway, this reinvigoration of trade led to the introduction of gunpowder, the printing press, pasta and naval technology from Asia into Europe. That's right, guys. Pasta. Everyone thinks it comes from Italy. It does not. It comes from China. Noodles were brought back by this guy here, Marco Polo. Marco Polo was from Venice. He traveled through China between 1271 and 1295. However, disease, the bubonic plague round 2, began spreading along the trade route to the Mongol Empire. It starts in the 13th century, really reaches a height in the 14th century. The plague that had lingered in southwest China was transferred to central and north China, to Central Asia, to Kaffa, and from there, the Mediterranean world, where 25 to 33% of Europe's population would die. All right, so here is the Mongol Empire around 1294 CE. And you can see the Khanate of the Great Khan. That's what starts as Genghis's, and then it becomes the Yuan dynasty. So everything in green, y'all, ends up being the Yuan dynasty. This is from a guy, Kublai Khan, who was never actually meant to inherit the empire. But he did this within 10 years. After Genghis died, so we can see the green border, that's Mongol control. But after Genghis dies, he's the first great Khan. He's also the last great Khan. He's able to unify all of these Khanates under his control, but when he dies, they fracture off again. The main ones that we're going to be looking at is the Yuan dynasty of China and the Golden Horde, which, as you can see, modern-day Russia. All right, looking at the Mongols and Islam, the Il Khan versus the Golden Horde. What we're looking at here is essentially the issues of religion. In the 1260s, the Il Khan Empire controlled parts of Armenia and all of Azerbaijan, Mesopotamia, and Iran. And it was founded by Hulagu, who was a Buddhist and a grandson of Genghis Khan. He was very accepting of other religions. But relations between the Mongols and their subjects were tense. See, the area that they're in, guys, the Il Khan, most of their subjects were Muslim. And it's tense because, remember we talked about, the Mongols sacked the city of Baghdad. They murdered the last Abbasid caliph. And that's going to create a lot of tension. By the end of the 13th century, Islam will reemerge as a potent force within the Mongol domains, and here's why. The Golden Horde. The Golden Horde is in Russia. It's under the domination of Genghis's grandson, Batu, who died in 1255. And his successor, Berka, converted to Islam, and he announced his intention to avenge the last caliph, which is essentially he's going to go to war with the Il Khan. And this is going to lead to the first conflict between Mongol domains of the Il Khan and the Golden Horde. And during this conflict, European leaders tried to make an alliance with the Buddhist Il Khans. And the goal was they're going to drive the Muslims out of Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine. The Il Khans sought European help in driving the Golden Horde out of the Caucasus. But the plans for this alliance came to a screeching halt and failed, because the Il Khan ruler Ghazan converted to Islam in 1295. And you'll remember, one of the rules of Islam, Muslims do not kill fellow Muslims. So this conversion ends the conflict between the Il Khan and the Golden Horde. In literature, the historian Giovanni wrote the first comprehensive account of the rise of the Mongols under Genghis Khan. Giovanni's work inspired the works of Rashid al-Din, who produced a history of the world that was published in a number of beautifully illustrated editions. Rashid al-Din, a Jewish convert to Islam who served as advisor to the Il Khan ruler, was a phenomenal example of the cosmopolitan nature of the Mongol world. You also have the Timurids, and they're under the Chagatai, by the way. The Timurids who supported notable historians, including the Moroccan Ibn Khaldun, who we discussed in the first podcast. Muslims under Mongol rulership also made great strides in astronomy, calendar making, and the prediction of eclipses. Their innovation included the use of epicycles to explain the movement of the moon around the Earth, the invention of a more precise astronomical instruments, and the collection of astronomical data from all parts of the Islamic world, as well as China, for predicting eclipses with greater accuracy. Some of this work eventually made its way and actually influenced the astronomer Copernicus, who we'll talk about later. In math, Muslim scholars adapted the Indian numerical system, and they devised the method for indicating decimal fractions and calculated the value of pi more accurately than had ever been done in the classical times. Muslim advances in science, astronomy, and mathematics were passed along to Europe, and they had a massive impact on the development of European science and math. And what you can see on the right is the Tomb of Timur. And what I want you to focus on is that turquoise blue tile, and that's going to become very typical first in Timurid architecture, and then it's going to spread. So what I want you to do is just pause for a minute and review the decline and the fall of the Yuan dynasty and the Ilkhan. So pause it. And then review the decline and fall of the Golden Horde and the Chagatai. If you have any questions, send me an email. This is our last podcast for the series. Thanks for listening, y'all, and have a great one. Cheers.